Welcome back to my channel. My name is Cole Anderson, and today we're going to talk about the first three consolations by Franz Liszt. As usual, please consider supporting this channel. You can do so most simply by just pressing the like button and the subscribe button down below. Or if you'd like to become a financial supporter of this channel, you can do so at www.patreon.com/independentpianist. At Patreon, you can sign up to make monthly pledges to financially support this channel. Any amount is vastly appreciated, so please do consider doing that. Or if you'd prefer, you can also make one-time donations through paypal.com as well. So thank you very much for considering doing that. It really helps me to continue to bring you this content each and every week. So thank you again for considering that. Franz Liszt is generally most notorious for his acrobatic pianistic virtuosity. Indeed, he was apparently one of the most spellbinding pianists you could imagine, one for whom difficulties simply seemed not to exist. And his way of writing for the piano was effortlessly natural. More than almost any other piano composer before Mettner, Liszt seems to always try to find the most comfortable, natural, and artistic way to create his pianistic effects. There are two qualities about Liszt, the composer, that are not generally acknowledged. Firstly, how original and powerful his own compositions were. The enormous success of certain of his operatic fantasies during his lifetime, for instance, one like the Don Juan fantasy, for example, and the success of many of his transcriptions, like the various Schubert song transcriptions, or the Beethoven Pastoral Symphony, or the Liebestod from Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, really overshadowed his remarkable contributions as an original composer. But I think it's really in his own original works that you can find what was most remarkable and characteristic about Liszt, both as a person, as a human being, and as a composer. Another quality about Liszt which sometimes goes unacknowledged was his enormous range among his original compositions. These compositions span from magnificently picturesque tone poems like his compositions in his Années de Pèlerinage, the Years of Pilgrimage, all the way to the powerfully interior logical construction of his B minor piano sonata, which is absolute music at its finest. There's also music of extreme devilry, like in his Scherzo in March, to music that expressed a sincerely poetic and reflective religious temperament. Liszt was really a man of extraordinary contradictions in his personality and in his musical personality as well, and you can most clearly see that in his compositions. Indeed, in spite of his reputation for being something of a pianistic devil, Liszt was a real true mystic, and famously even took minor holy orders towards the end of his life, becoming, after 1865, the Abbé Liszt. There are several serious works among his compositions that demonstrate Liszt's poetic tendency towards religious thought, most famously his set of 10 pieces entitled Harmonie poétique et religieuse, and this set of 6 consolations. From a pianistic and musical standpoint, these consolations can be seen as a kind of free response to the sound world that Chopin had already opened up with his nocturnes. And in fact, the famous third consolation, which I'm playing today, has a decided similarity to Chopin's famous nocturne in D-flat major, Opus 27, No. 2. The opening voicing is remarkably similar, and both pieces also begin on the same pitch in the melody. What's even more remarkable about this is that for Liszt, even while beginning from a similar starting point as Chopin, he manages to create an entirely unique and personal piece that is every bit as magical as its predecessor. And that's saying a lot, as that nocturne is one of the great nocturnes ever written. But certainly these pieces are pieces of nighttime and contemplation, and many people who might be familiar with Liszt the virtuoso will be surprised to hear this much gentler side of Liszt's muse. As with most of Liszt's compositions, there is no doubt a literary connection here as well. Generally, you might see these pieces connected to a poem from Lamartine's set of religious poetry, again called the Harmonie poétique et religieuse, which Liszt of course knew. There is a consolation in that set of poems, which is usually pointed to as the inspiration for these pieces. Actually, I don't think this is correct, though, and the reason for this is because that particular consolation has a much more desolate and kind of bleak mood. And in fact, Liszt had already quoted the first stanzas of that poem to introduce his great masterwork, the Andante Lagrimoso, which is another underrated masterwork of Liszt's, hardly ever played, but incredibly powerful and beautiful in its loneliness and desolation. When it comes to these consolations, though, it's much more likely that Liszt was referencing Charles Sainte-Beuve's set of poetry entitled Consolations that was written in the 1830s. These poems deal with many themes, but prominent among them are the consolation and support that friendship can play in the struggle to find true religious faith. Of course, this was a struggle that Liszt was engaged in throughout his life, so considering that this poetry may have been the inspiration can perhaps give us more insight into Liszt's mind when he was writing these pieces. A small technical note as well, when Liszt wrote these works in the 1840s to 1850s, the sostenuto pedal, or middle pedal, had not yet been invented. It was pioneered in the 1880s by Steinway & Sons in the United States, and Steinway actually sent Liszt a piano that had a sostenuto pedal on it right after they first pioneered this new invention. Evidently, Liszt loved this instrument, this 1880s Steinway, and was quite taken with the possibilities of the sostenuto pedal. In fact, he actually rewrote the opening bars of the third consolation and sent the example in a letter to Henry Steinway demonstrating how the sostenuto pedal could be used to good advantage in this piece. Hopefully this should put to rest objections from purists about using the sostenuto pedal in performances of Liszt's works and other composers of that era. Usually the argument against it goes along the lines of, he didn't have one, so we shouldn't use it, which I think is a rather unimaginative kind of argument. Actually, Liszt, for one, embraced this new device and immediately started trying to put it to good use. There are not many places where the sostenuto pedal is necessarily useful in the works of these composers, but once in a while you find a place like this third consolation where it really is remarkable in its efficacy. So in that spirit, I have used it as well, and I've marked its use in the score. It's very useful for sustaining these long-held bass notes that are kind of like organ pedal tones. And also, it provides a very interesting method for performing the ending as well, which has always struck me as being somewhat problematic in this piece. So anyway, please enjoy the performance, and see you next time.